Now, Cleveland's saying they don't really care, but what else are they going to say? Myles Garrett says he wants out of Cleveland. Arguably, maybe not even arguably, maybe it's just obviously the best defensive end, pass rusher, edge guy in football today, and he wants out. He's been in Cleveland his whole career. He no longer has faith in that organization to build anything that will get him to a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And, you know, given the mistakes that they've made at the quarterback position, I'm not sure I entirely blame him. And he's given it his best. But when guys right away are like, no, I can't possibly win here, I think that's lame. But you want to give it, close to 7 years, 8 years, whatever it's been for Myles Garrett, and you still don't see the plan moving forward? Yeah. I got no problems at all with saying, all right, I want out of here. You got to let me go somewhere else to try to play for a team that can actually win. And this isn't it. I trusted you. I signed with you. I did all these things. You didn't deliver on your promises. I'm out. You're spending $1 gazillion on a quarterback who can't play and who's a problem, both, personally and professionally. So I got no problems with him. I know the Browns have to say they're not going to trade him because otherwise they lose all their leverage whatsoever. But we all know the way this works. They'll now probably be fielding phone calls on trading Myles Garrett because they don't want him to just hold out and get nothing for him. So if you're the Seahawks, how invested are you in trying to get Myles Garrett to Seattle?
Yeah, it's a unique position, right? This is not as you look at it on paper and with this roster and with this team and what they did, Salk, in the second half of last season. If we want to talk about the final 35 games with the Mariners and use that as a harbinger of things to come, well, what about the final 6, 7, 8 games with these Seahawks? What about the way that, Boye and Derek Hall and getting Uchenna back and what Leonard and all your, resources that you have on that defensive line on paper? Is this an area where you'd say, ooh, yeah, come on, Seahawks. Come on, make that call.
Yeah, it is.
It is for you?
Yeah, it is. Because of the importance of that position. I think that as much as offensive line, I would include this in the trenches, right? Isn't this still a trench position?
Oh, 100%.
So,
and he is a unique, just one of the...
If he was a corner, if he
remember,
was a
he went
wideout,
1A. He was number 1-1.
Oh, yeah.
1-1.
If this was a corner, if it was a wideout, if it was a safety, if it was even an off-ball linebacker, running back, it's the only position. Even right now, even if he was as incredibly disruptive defensive lineman, I think I'd still be very intrigued, but maybe not quite to the same level. Man, this is the one thing they're missing. It is an edge rusher, superstar player. Remember all the conversations we've had about stars here in Seattle, including just a few minutes ago, who changes the game.
Yep.
But
you know the challenge with this. And I can hear it already. I can hear it from Ording to Omak, right across the state, Salk. Like, you've done this. Learn your lessons. You did this with Jamal Adams. You've done this with trades, and we're talking multiple first rounders and the value that, just building. You haven't done this. What are the big trades the Seahawks have made? Jamal Adams was 2 first rounders. I put him right at the top of the list. For a safety, pass rusher, linebacker,
for a safety,
impact player,
for a safety.
All in their mind could be a 3-level guy.
For a safety.
So he set the all-time record for defensive back in the history of the NFL.
He's a safety.
For sacking.
Who else?
Back.
Jimmy Graham? Awful idea. Tight end, who was a pass receiver, absolutely took them away from their identity. Total disaster. We've talked through it. All right, Percy Harvin helped them win a Super Bowl, obviously. But, again, they didn't give up as much. It was 1 first-round pick. Dwayne Brown? You're going to argue that didn't work out? I would argue it did. He solidified the left side of your offensive line for 5, 6, 7 years. They didn't give up as much for Sheldon Richardson. Stop it. That's not right.
How about when KJ put that name out in space?
No, man, does he not like Sheldon Richardson? I guess the point is, Brock, all of them have worked pretty, the ones that when you were looking at guys at the right spot, the Jadeveon Clowney would be the one. They didn't end up giving up that much for him.
Right. And Texans ate some of that money, too.
And then they didn't end up getting that much for him either. So
I don't know. He was
good
that year.
He was good for 1 year. Yep. First of all, Jadeveon Clowney then was not Myles Garrett now.
No.
Right? I mean, you're talking about the premier defensive end in the game. How could you not be intrigued by that? Here's some thoughts from Diana Rossini from one NFL GM on what a trade would look like. Probably a 1+. Can't wait for it will be 3 number ones crowd not happening. another GM or the same GM, a 1 and a 2, a 1 and 2 threes, maybe throw a player in there. That's what you're looking for here.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have some players, right? And certainly a Boye and a Derek Hall that flashed with 7, 8.5 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the 18th pick in this draft. Obviously, you've got a DK Metcalf. That would mean, they would move some salary and would have to inherit some salary. Myles is in the penultimate year of his contract. Would count only about $19 million against the cap this year.
Okay, so what if? So let me write you a little scenario here, okay? What if you gave up the number 18 pick, choose one of Boye and Hall, whichever one that they want, you keep the other, and a third-round pick for Myles Garrett. And then you turned around and traded DK Metcalf somewhere else for a first-round pick, a second-round pick. I don't know exactly what you would get back. For DK. I've been sort of under the impression that you could get a first-rounder, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You could still then have a first-rounder to use on an offensive lineman, or you would have 2 second-rounders in a draft where that's about what you need. And you would be making a complete change in what your team was all about. You would be all about the line of scrimmage, which is exactly what you say you want to be all about.
I think
and exactly what Jed Fish just said the Eagles and Howie Roseman are all about.
You say that out loud, and a lot of it does start to make a little bit more sense. Then ultimately you kind of, again, have to ask a Mariner question. And I'm sorry to do this. I'm a baseball guy. Everything football comes back to baseball. It's just the way my mind works now in this day and age. So it's all been flipped. I've been rewired as a baseball guy.
Of course.
Kind of like we can have these conversations, but you know what? Does Christian Walker want to be a Mariner? Do they actually want to come to Seattle? If Myles Garrett wants to go chase a Super Bowl, do you think Myles Garrett looks at this place and says, "Yep"?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question.
The LA Rams versus the 49ers.
Very good question. Now, my guess is he could look at it and say, "Yeah, I'd like to chase a Super Bowl in Baltimore," and the Browns would be like, "Yeah, sorry."
Correct.
Like, we'll make a deal, but we're not going to trade you inside the division with the Ravens. So good luck with that. Yeah. All right. So could he say, no, I'm limiting it to this many teams?
Right.
He could. I can't imagine that the Seahawks would be on a list of teams he would say no to.
I wouldn't think so. I think rushing the passer here is pretty fun. I think he's been and played in front of the 12s a couple different times.
He knows who Mike McDonald is and what he did in Baltimore in his division. So I would think they would be.
I'm just throwing that out
I'm
there.
not saying that this would be his favorite destination, that he's looking at Cleveland saying, trade me to Seattle. But I can't imagine why it wouldn't be on a list of places he'd be okay with going.
I would tend to agree with that.
So, I think that there is a lot of I think there should be some smoke and some fire here. I think that this should be a conversation that they are very serious about having. And I think there are ways to mitigate what you would have to give up. And I think it would bring legitimate star power.
And you actually do have
young
resources there that if you were willing, like an old baseball trade, right, to give some of your, I'm not going to say proven star commodities. I don't think Boye and Derek Hall are that in the league, but they're very good players. They're very good players with still some upside to them that you could replenish.
It would help mitigate the loss for Cleveland while giving them, the necessary resources to get something back. I'm very intrigued by this, and I didn't know that it was going to happen, but as soon as it pops up, yes. There aren't too many players in the league right now that I would say that about, but Myles Garrett would be one of them because of what a tone setter he is, what a game changer he is. He plays the run, he plays the pass. I mean, he does everything. So, yeah, I think you absolutely need to be very, very involved in trying to bring in a star like Myles Garrett.